The Queen of Soul commanded one of the most powerful voices of the 20th century, but the document that would decide her family's future said nothing at all, because nobody could find it. This is the story of the will and the couch. When Aretha Franklin died in August 2018, the world mourned a legend: 18 Grammys. The first woman ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. A voice that turned respect into an anthem for a generation. And behind the legend, 4 sons, a catalog of music worth a fortune, houses, jewelry, royalties, an estate that would keep earning money for decades. And here's what most people never knew about the Queen of Soul. She was famously, almost legendarily, careful with money. She had come up in an era when black artists were robbed blind by managers, labels, and promoters, and she never forgot it. Stories about her caution circulated for decades. She preferred to be paid before she sang, in cash, and she was known to keep her purse close enough to see it, sometimes right there on the piano while she performed. This was not a careless woman. This was a woman who trusted paperwork less than she trusted her own 2 hands. Which is what made the first headline so hard to believe, because it seemed she had left no will. For a woman famously private and famously careful about her money, Aretha Franklin appeared to have done the one thing estate lawyers beg their clients never to do. She left no instructions at all. Under Michigan law, that meant her 4 sons would share the estate equally, and it meant the courts, the lawyers, and the public would be involved in everything. For 9 months, that was the story. The Queen of Soul died without a will. Then her niece, Sabrina Owens, went through the house in Detroit, and the story changed completely. In a locked cabinet among legal papers and old record contracts, she found handwritten documents dated June 2010, a will, written in Aretha's own hand. And then looking deeper, she found something stranger, inside a spiral notebook, under the cushions of the couch. Another will, dated 2014. 4 pages written in Aretha's looping handwriting with notes in the margins and words scratched out. The kind of document you'd mistake for a grocery list if it didn't happen to control a multi-million-dollar estate. Now, stop and consider what this meant. There wasn't one will. There were 2, written 4 years apart, with different instructions, and no lawyer involved in either. Here's the legal wrinkle that turned this into a battle. Michigan is one of the states that recognizes what lawyers call a holographic will, a will written entirely in your own hand. No lawyer, no notary. If the court believes you wrote it and meant it, it counts. It's a rule designed for emergencies, for soldiers and farmers and people who never made it to a law office. And it meant that a spiral notebook from under a couch cushion could, in principle, control everything. The question that would consume this family for the next 4 years was brutally simple. Which piece of paper was the real one? It mattered more than you might think because the differences were not small. The 2010 will, the one from the locked cabinet, came with conditions. It said that 2 of her sons, Kikalf and Edward, must take business classes and get a certificate or a degree before they could benefit from the estate. A mother's hand reaching out from beyond, still trying to shape her boys. The 2014 will, the one under the cushions, dropped that requirement entirely, and it gave Kikalf and his children something specific: Aretha's main home in Bloomfield Hills, valued at over $1 million when she died, and worth far more today. 2 pieces of paper, 2 versions of a mother's last wishes, and on each side of that divide, her sons. Kikalf and Edward stood behind the 2014 will, the one that freed them from conditions and gave Kikalf the house. Their brother Ted White II stood behind the 2010 will. Brothers who had lost their mother now found themselves on opposite sides of a courtroom, fighting over which version of her handwriting was law. This is the part of inheritance stories nobody warns you about. The fight is almost never just about money. It's about love, measured in ink. When a parent writes 2 different sets of instructions, the children don't just read assets. They read favoritism, punishment, trust, and doubt. Every scratched-out word becomes an argument. Every margin note becomes evidence. For 4 years, the case crawled through probate court. Lawyers were hired and fired. Hearings were scheduled and postponed. The estate paid its bills, including a substantial debt to the tax authorities, while the brothers waited and aged and hardened into their positions. Kicalf was 53 by the time it ended. Edward was 64. Grief had long since given way to litigation, and in July 2023, nearly 5 years after Aretha's death, the question finally went to a jury in Michigan. The trial was remarkably short. It began on a Monday, and by Tuesday, it was over. The evidence was the paper itself. Expert questions hovered over the courtroom. Was this really her handwriting? Did she intend this notebook to be her will? And then there was the signature. At the bottom of the 2014 document, Aretha had signed her name, and inside the letter A, she had drawn a smiley face. A smiley face. The jury had to decide whether a signature with a cartoon grin inside it was legally valid. It took them less than an hour. The verdict, the 2014 will, the notebook from under the couch cushions, was valid. The smiley face held up in court. The Queen of Soul's final wishes, scrawled in a spiral notebook, beat the locked cabinet, the conditions, and 4 years of litigation. That November, a judge distributed her properties accordingly. Kicalf got the Bloomfield Hills home, just as the couch will instructed. There's a detail from that verdict worth sitting with. To rule for the couch will, the jury effectively decided that the most casual version of Aretha, the one scribbling in a spiral notebook, scratching out words, doodling a smile into her own signature, was the truest one, not the formal woman of the locked cabinet. The law went looking for her real intentions and found them between the cushions, smiley face and all. So what do we take from the strange case of Aretha Franklin's couch? First, this happens to the rich and famous constantly. 2 years before Aretha died, Prince died with no will at all, and his estate spent 6 years in court while administrators, claimants, and lawyers consumed millions that could have gone to the people he loved. Estate lawyers have a grim saying about this: everyone has a will. Either you write it, or your state writes it for you. Talent doesn't protect you. Money doesn't protect you. Fame definitely doesn't protect you. The only thing that protects a family is a clear, single, properly executed document. And just as important, a family that knows it exists and knows where it lives. Second, and more uncomfortable, Aretha did write her wishes down. Twice. And it still tore her family apart, because the papers disagreed with each other, and because nobody knew they existed. A will that nobody can find is a time bomb. 2 wills that contradict each other is a war. And third, somewhere in your own family, there is a couch, a locked drawer, a notebook, a document someone wrote and never mentioned, or worse, never wrote at all. The most expensive sentence in the English language might be, "We'll sort it out later." The voice that demanded respect spent 5 years waiting for her last wishes to get it. We read the fine print, so you don't have to. Subscribe. This is the fine print.